Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, welcome to another episode of The Twos. This is a part of our VFL coverage on the Hoops Crew, usually only available to our Patreon subscribers, but this year decided to do a couple of episodes in the pre-season that everyone on YouTube and Spotify can enjoy and get an idea of what we do about the VFL for our Hoops Crew Patreon members during the year. So this is the second part of my player profile series, basically just having a look at players who are likely to play a fair chunk of time in the VFL, as well as some games up in the AFL. They're usually players who are, young guys making their way, trying to forge their way into the team, or experienced players who are maybe at the tail end or found themselves pushed out of the side on form. So yes, definitely go back and have a look at part one. Now, unfortunately, I had a video issue with part one, so it's not on YouTube, but it is on Spotify. It is over on our Patreon, so you can listen to it that way. But today is no video issues today. We've got it on YouTube. We've got it on Spotify. We've got it on Patreon. So let's get into it. We're going to be talking today about half a dozen players. We're going to look at Mitch Knevitt. We're going to talk about Connor O'Sullivan. We're going to talk Joe Pike, Oli Wiltshire, George Stevens, and Jed Bews. That's our 6 players that we're going to look at this afternoon, this evening, whatever time you're watching. The wonders of 24/7 digital media. You can watch this whenever time you like. Let's start with a couple of players who we've already got to see this year. And I guess I wasn't expecting to see them this year, at least not so early at the AFL level. We'll start with Mitch Knevitt. This is a player who was drafted to the Cats back in 2021. He's been a slow burn developer with tantalizing potential if he can pull it all together. 22-year-old, stands 193 centimeters. At his absolute best, I've sort of envisaged him, offering a befuddling matchup in the middle of the ground against sort of lesser-sized opponents. Last year's VFL form was strong. He had 16 games, averaging a tick under 23 touches per game, 4.8 marks, 4 tackles, and 4.7 clearances. So I really liked what he did in the VFL last year. Problem was transferring that from VFL to AFL level. He only played 4 AFL games last year, and it just didn't happen for him. He averaged just 6.8 disposals, 3.5 marks, 2.5 tackles, 0.3 clearances. He finished his campaign in the VFL strongly, a 38 disposal, 10 tackle performance in the semi-final loss to Southport, and that, I suppose, left Mitch Knevitt optimists hopeful that 2025 might be the year that he converts on his potential. And we've already got to have a look at Mitch Knevitt in round 1 in that absolute spanking of the Dockers. It was easily his best performance at AFL level. 20 or more, 20 plus touches, double-digit tackles, looked physically stronger, looked more comfortable at the level. This was his high watermark in terms of playing at the top level of the sport. But for me, this needs to be his floor. This, if we're talking floor and ceiling, which I talk about a lot when we're talking about the twos and the VFL coverage on the hoops, this needs to be the baseline. He needs to come in and more often than not get that 20 touches. He needs to lay plenty of tackles. He needs to win, his sort of handful of clearances. That needs to be the baseline moving forward with Mitch Knevitt. So I don't want everyone to look at this game as like, this is as good as he ever has to play. No, we want this to be the regular and then, better performances above it. I think it's a good starting point. But this is, as I said, this is the consistent form we need him to find when he's at AFL level, because it's the sort of thing he does at VFL level. And then you want him to find that extra gear. So for me, Mitch Knevitt isn't the finished product. And I'm not saying he has to be right now, but he's not. I wouldn't expect that he'll play every game at AFL level this season. I think I'm still going to spend plenty of time watching him at VFL level. I think he'll spend some time as the sub this year. I think success for him in 2025, from my perspective, is playing probably double-digit AFL games this year, maybe a dozen games at the level, and absolutely shredding when he gets dropped back to the VFL level. You want him to come back, and a bit like when Toby Conway plays down there, you're just going, well, he's too good. We're just wasting him. You know, his development is going to now happen on an AFL footy field. That's what it has to be for me. Double-digit games at the AFL level, shreds the VFL when he goes down and plays there. I think specifically he probably still needs to add more power to his game, and I think that's probably a little bit, a bit like Jai Clark, a bit like Ted Closey. They just need to get a little bit bigger. Now, comparing him from when he was drafted to now, it's night and day. He is so much bigger and stronger, but I think he's still got a little bit of room to grow there. That's just, over the course of time, another preseason, etc., etc. So the signs for Mitch Knevitt are really good. I think if you've been holding, we do an episode, obviously on the Hoops, the stonks extravaganza, you're buying, selling, or holding stonks. I've been holding on to, I bought Mitch Knevitt stonks early. I've been holding on to them. I think he's still got the potential to transform into a really great AFL player. He's not there yet. The signs are good, but he's not broken through yet for me on a permanent basis. One really good game. And again, one really good game by his standards. He didn't get into my best on ground votes. It's Mitch Knevitt's best game, but for me, it wasn't the best game on the park. It wasn't, he might have got in that sort of top 5 or 10 for me, but it's got to get better. So he's not broken the side on a permanent basis yet for me. I think he's just established where his baseline should be. That should be what we expect from Mitch Knevitt week in, week out. It doesn't have to look exactly like that in terms of the numbers, but I think to get around 20 touches playing in the midfield is a pretty good expectation. And then laying lots of tackles. You're not going to stay in this Geelong team if you can't tackle and if you're not tackling consistently. So we've established the baseline. Can he maintain it now at AFL level? Can he build on it is the big question. Let's pivot to talk now about a different player at a different position, but another young player who got a round one opportunity, and that is Connor O'Sullivan. Drafted at the end of 2023, the former Albury Tiger drew instant Mark Blixarve's parallels with his thrilling combination of height and athleticism. You don't have to squint hard to make that connection work. He's big enough to play as a key defender, to pinch hit in the ruck. He's mobile enough to clean the ball up on the ground and dash around a wing. So, the shoe fits. His first season of VFL footy at the Cats was hugely, hugely successful. He played in 18 games, averaged 15.5 touches, 5.6 marks, and earned a single AFL appearance where he grabbed 3 marks and 11 disposals. I think that was against North Melbourne. The classic Geelong Bloods, a rookie player ahead of time against a soft kill opposition. So his form did dip across the back half of the season, which I think was probably, attributable to the strength of opposition sort of stiffening towards finals time. And the stakes were raised. Opponents probably got a lot tougher, a lot better at identifying Geelong's weaknesses, how to isolate him one-on-one. And I think also just O'Sullivan probably still lacking a full, professional footballer's fitness base to run out a campaign from start to finish. But still, it was a massive tick on his rookie year at the Cats. So we'll pivot now and talk about 2025 for O'Sullivan. And look, I thought there was a chance that we might see him in round one of the AFL season, particularly once the news came out that Jake Kolodjasny was going to be out with injury. O'Sullivan had some nice moments in the win over the Dockers. I think he also demonstrated that he is still an inexperienced player with lots of room to grow. He's probably a bit lucky that Josh Tracy struggled with his goal kicking. The Freo forward, I think, had the better of the young cat in a number of those one-on-one marking situations. So look, while Jake Kolodjasny is out of the side, I expect O'Sullivan to rack up AFL appearances. But I think once Collar is fit and firing, I think we'll probably see the young defender return to the VFL to continue his development. Success for Connor O'Sullivan in 2025, according to me, podcast Bozo, it would probably look statistically a lot like his 2024 season, but a stronger end to his campaign. Regardless of whether he's playing at VFL or AFL level, I want to see that 15 plus disposals per game to go with 5.5 plus marks per game. Probably showing development in his ability to contest one-on-one defensively. Those are all things that would get big ticks from me. But just demonstrating that I can start a season well and I can also finish a season strongly. Just the body getting used to the rigors of week in, week out sort of professional level football. I think, once College Asney's back, Connor O'Sullivan probably bumps back down to the twos, unless form or fitness of someone else dictates that he's back in the side. I mean, if College Asney was injured all season, I think, Connor O'Sullivan's got a good chance to play every game this year. So that's exciting from his point of view. I think it's exciting from our point of view as fans that this player with so much potential is already to that point where he's probably next man up at the position. I think that bodes well for the future. Let's stay on the topic of big men here and talk about Joe Pike. So this is a name that some of you probably won't have heard as much. Some of you may not have watched play. I watched all 6 of his games at VFL level last year for the Cats. And he was just playing on the VFL list last year. And based on that, he got drafted by the Cats this season. So he showed some really impressive signs. On the list, I'm just trying to see where are we. He averaged 10.2 disposals, 3.7 clearances, and 3.2 tackles with 19.8 hitouts per game. Strongest performance was probably probably his first game, I would say. It was against Coburg in round 8. He won 30 hitouts, kicked 2 goals. That's probably the one that jumps off the stat sheet the most as his most impressive game. Rookie Me Central, great website. If you haven't checked it out, you absolutely should. They listed his strengths as his clean hands, one-on-one work, his ruck craft, and his strength. For some perspective, he's really solid figure at 203 centimeters with plenty of muscle. I think they listed his areas for improvement about decision-making and forward craft, and I think I'd probably agree with that from the games I watched of him last year. Limited sample size, I know, but I think that proved out. So this year, I think it's surely going to be one of further development at VFL level for Joe Pike. For me, it's almost impossible to imagine him pushing in for an AFL appearance this year. He's more of a long-term project player for Geelong, in my opinion. But that means we'll be watching plenty of him at the VFL level, covering him a lot in the twos on Patreon. So what would I like to see from him to classify this season as a success? I think if he can average somewhere similar to that 20-ish hitouts per game, probably around 4 clearances, and keep laying a few tackles, maybe add 10 to 15 goals to the board. I think he kicked 3 last year, so 3 in 6 appearances. So if he can play the majority of the season for the Cats, and obviously this is a bit dependent on how many games he plays. But yeah, 10 to 15 goals, I think, would be a reasonable expectation. It's interesting to me to see what opportunities he gets in the ruck around the health of Toby Conway, Mitch Edwards, and the pecking order placing of Reece Stanley, and also fellow big man draftee Jacob Mollier. I think those 4 players probably all rank ahead of Joe Pike at the moment. So where does Joe Pike fit in? Does he play more as a forward? I think if Conway's healthy, it's going to be really interesting now. If Conway's healthy, how far down the line are Geelong on the Sam de Koning as ruckman sort of the future? Is that a plan that they're totally bought in on? Is that, plan A now, and Toby Conway getting healthy is sort of a plan B? That's going to be really interesting. If Conway's healthy, I would be expecting him to play a lot of AFL footy and not very much in the VFL level. Mitch Edwards, not so much at the AFL level. I think they'll try and pump games into Mitch Edwards if he's healthy. And then you've got Stanley hanging around, for another ruck in the situation. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where Joe Pike can sort of force his way in. It's important to remember too that from what I could find, this is, Pike is on a 1-year deal. That's per footywire.com. I don't know if there's a better source, if anyone knows one, to find out what contract lengths these players are on. But footywire.com has Pike listed as being on a 1-year deal. So it's important to him. He's got to make the most of whatever opportunities he gets at VFL level, whether that's ruck, whether that's as a forward. And so, look, if he earns another year on the AFL list, I think that in and of itself would be a massive success for the Joe Pike Project in 2025. Good band name there, the Joe Pike Project. Let's talk about another player that we're not likely to see at AFL level, but will more probably try and build his game at VFL level. That's Oli Wiltshire. 7 games last season, and I'll be honest with you, Ollie Wiltshire, the impact he left on me in those 7 games wasn't particularly strong. I didn't feel like I came away from watching him last year with a strong idea of what he was or who he was. He's an exciting, sort of build as an exciting, smaller, medium forward type. Probably lived in the shadow of a player like Sean Manor early in the season and then got injured. So, he played, I think it was rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then wasn't back in the VFL side until round 21. His best performance probably either he had 11 touches, 4 tackles, and a goal against Brisbane Lions in round 4 of the VFL season. Or you could go and have a look. He had 19 touches, 5 marks, 5 tackles in the semi-final loss to Southport. And that game against Southport probably could have looked more eye-catching if he'd taken his chances on goal. He kicked no goals, 3 behinds. So if that was 2 goals, 1 or 3 goals zip, you'd be looking at that performance and going, there it is. There's the archetypal Ollie Wiltshire performance. Let's see more of that. So I guess that game did leave something of an impression on me because it was, wow, if he had kicked straight, you'd sort of see what was cooking in the Ollie Wiltshire kitchen headed into 2025. So we've seen extremely promising flashes from him this offseason, particularly in sort of the match sim action. So, take that with a grain of salt. He kicked 1 or 2 of the more mercurial goals of the Civil War reenactment period of Geelong's 2025 preseason. That's what I call the preseason games. They're Civil War reenactment. They look like real games of football, but they are not. I think it's probably left a lot of VFL heads wondering if this is the year that we see Wiltshire show what he's all about. I think it's important that we do because he is another young cat entering the last year of his contract at Geelong. Again, at least per the information that I could find. Wiltshire, I think he needs to stay healthy and show his wares at VFL level if he's going to extend his stay at the Cats. And what does that look like for me? Well, it's upping the goal kicking and tackling numbers. I think he needs to kick, if he plays, say, 12 to 15 matches this season, I like to think he can contribute 20-ish goals and pump up his tackling numbers. It was 1.7 tackles per game. Get that to a minimum, 2.5 to 3 tackles per game, I think, up forward. I think maybe 2.5 on average would be fine. But, if you can push more towards that 3 a game, the tackling part of his game is going to be really important. Obviously, he's got to kick goals, but it's hard to imagine Geelong ever seeing a future or elevating a young, small to medium forward into their team who doesn't tackle ferociously and consistently. So that defensive part of his game is absolutely key. So those are my milestones that I want to see Ollie Wiltshire hit. 12 games, which would sort of prove his health. Okay, he's played, 12 of 20 matches or whatever it is. Preferably he finishes the season in the team. If he's going to have an injury upset, let's have it be at the start of the year and then he gets a strong run in the back half of the year. Kick 20-ish goals and something averaging near 3 tackles per game. So those are my thoughts there on Ollie Wiltshire. 2 players to go. We're going to talk Jed Bews. We're going to talk George Stevens. So first up, Bews. He averaged 17 games per season at AFL level for the Cats from 2014 to 2023. And then suddenly last year found himself selected in the team on just 5 occasions during the 2024 campaign. I think Bews optimists will point to the fact that when he was selected, it was at the pointy end of the season, including both of Geelong's finals matches. Bews pessimists will probably say that this is a veteran player coming to the end of his run and that the way he performed in those matches proves their point. So where is the truth for this burly 31-year-old defender? Look, I think I'm somewhere in the middle, probably skewing towards the pessimism side of things a little more. So to look ahead to 2025, something that stands out to me is the splits between his VFL and his AFL stats last year. So playing in the seconds, Bews averaged nearly 18 touches per game, 13.5 of those by foot and 14.5 by hand. 4.5 by hand. He grabbed 5 marks and 1 clearance per game and smacked through 5 goals, some of which were absolute belters from outside 50. But those numbers really did drop off a cliff in his 5 AFL appearances. You know, you go from 17.9 disposals to 10 per game, 13.2 kicks to 6. The marks were about the same, 5 dropping down to 4. The tackles were similar, 1.8 to 1.4. Clearances went, 1 to 0.4. Not that we're worrying about Bews winning too many clearances, but what's sort of weird about that, though, is that those AFL numbers that he produced in the 5 games were sort of on par with the rest of his AFL career. He only averages 11.3 touches career, 3.4 marks. So his marking numbers were actually up last year on his career average. 2.3 tackles, so his tackles were down. So where does he fit in 2025? I mean, I think we all would agree as Cats fans, this is a side that is right there. We just, ready to compete again. We talked about it last night on the Chaps recap of the Cats v Dockers game, that this is a list that is now transitioning to have a lot of its key contributors being sort of like 20 to 26 years of age, like right in that young, developing talent to peak age kind of talent where guys are going to be playing their best footy. It is not so much anymore that, the majority of players are like 28, 29 plus. It's now that those veterans like your Stewarts, like your Camerons, Dangerfield, Blixarves are sprinkled in as a really nice, additive to the bulk of players in that, starting 23 who are in their early to mid 20s. So where does Bews fit with that sort of list demographic? I think for me, that as long as Geelong feels that O'Shane Mullen has promise and needs AFL games to develop, then I think Jed Bews is going to be playing VFL footy. Mullen, obviously, I'm not going to stand here and say, he's already better than Bews. Like, he lacks massively, like the defensive football craft that Bews already has. But I think it's undeniable to say that Bews is beginning to fall behind what Mullen offers in terms of his speed, agility, and power. Like, you can actually play O'Shane Mullen as an effective athletic matchup on Jason Horne-Francis. You saw it last year. You can't say that of Bews. Now, Bews, I think, probably understands a little bit more of how to face up defensively against some of those crafty medium to smaller forwards that Mullen lacks. So that's the trade-off at the moment. It's hard to see both of those guys playing in the same side. In fact, they only played together twice last year. And it was the 2 finals. It was the qualifying and the prelim final. My guess, this is my opinion on Bews, is that in 2025, he is a break glass in case of emergency veteran depth type player. He's probably going to play 12 or more games in the VFL. That would be my estimate. And he'll play well, and he'll help add experience and professionalism to that team. And if he plays AFL footy, it's probably going to be more down to either poor performance of a player like Mullen ahead of him, a specific matchup requirement where they go, actually, we could probably use both of you in the team, or it's going to be a breakdown of the pecking order due to injury. What does success for Bews look like in 2025? I think playing really well at VFL level like he did last year, and then just taking his opportunities to play a role when he's offered one at the AFL level. Staying healthy in his age 31 season might be the most crucial aspect of all. All right, final player of my VFL player profiles for 2025. We're going to talk about George Stevens. So George Stevens, he's a dour, unflashy ball winner who dealt with a lot of injury to start his journey at the Cats. He began to build, though, his resume at Geelong in the VFL in 2024. He's a player who wouldn't look out of place on, a 1990s Geelong team photo next to like a Hocking or a Stoneham. He's hardly an eye-catching talent. Like, he doesn't do a lot of highlight reel sort of footy, but what he lacks in sizzle reel, I think he made up for in raw numbers across his first healthy campaign in the Hoops. He played 19 games last season. That would be up there as one of the 2 or 3 most games for the Cats in 2024's VFL season. He racked up 399 disposals, which was second most on the team behind Mitch Hardy. He won 79 clearances, second most on the team behind Mitch Hardy. And he laid 70 tackles, which was fourth most on the team. To give you an idea of the sort of player he is, he also dished off more handballs, 226, than any other player on the team. So he's number one in the side for handballs. And if I had the contested possession stats for the VFL team in front of me, I would guess that he'd have been near the top for Geelong's VFL midfield last year. So spinning forward to 2025, we know that Stevens last year, he started the year a little slowly, and then a lot like fellow youngsters Jai Clark and Connor O'Sullivan, he actually faded a little across sort of the back third of the campaign as well. So slow start, slow end, but in the middle, we had this really amazing portion of games from him, from rounds 8 to 16 of the VFL season. In that time, he averaged 25.3 disposals, 3.9 tackles, 3.6 marks, and 5.5 clearances per game. So what does success look like this year for George Stevens? Well, for me, and this is his third year at the Cats. The first one was injury stricken. The next one, he played a lot of games. So what do we want to do now that we can build on that? It's a crucial year. I believe this is the final year of his deal. And it's a huge opportunity for him to compete to be the number one midfielder in that VFL lineup. They've said, see ya to Mitch Hardy, who will no longer be there. I mean, there's 100 plus clearances, 400 plus disposals. Mitch Hardy's gone. It's likely that you'll probably see less of Mitch Knevitt if his AFL form holds. So there's 2 of Geelong's, say, like 3 to 5 best midfielders from last season gone. Does Jai Clark spend a lot of time as a sub? Does Ted Closey perhaps spend some time as a sub at AFL level? There could be a platform for George Stevens to become one of the 1 or 2 most crucial midfielders for the Cats in the 2025 VFL campaign. So I think he can win more disposals, he can win more clearances this season, and he's going to need to. So success for me for George Stevens this year looks like 25 plus touches per game, 5 plus clearances, and 4 plus tackles per game. In fact, if his tackle count, that might need to look a bit higher if he's going to force his way into a Geelong AFL team. Their identity is so built around, again, ferocious defensive pressure applied consistently. He's going to have to show that he's got the power and health in his body to do that. Maybe the tackles do need to be maybe 4 plus per game is an absolute minimum. He's also going to have to show he's got the power in his body to win contested ball and break tackles as an inside mid at the next level. So, I don't expect him to ever develop into a seriously pacey midfielder. That's not the type of player he is, but you do want to see him be able to withstand, a physical battering, essentially on the inside of the stoppage situation. You do want to see him be able to have the power to break tackles and stiff arm people and, what do they call it in footy? The don't argue. all of that stuff, you want to see him display some health and power here. And I think he can. I think 2024 can be a great stepping stone, and 2025 can be the platform that he builds for himself to earn a contract extension and maybe more AFL footy in 2026. So it's a big opportunity for him. He's got lots of work to do, and he's probably the player I'll be watching most closely, or one of the players I'll be watching most closely. All right, thanks so much for watching part 2 of my player profiles. The VFL coverage, it starts in earnest this weekend. Geelong have their first game of the season. I think we're playing Sandringham on March 23rd. So I'll be watching that game. I will be providing a full recap on the Hoops Crew Patreon of how all of these players are going, performing, developing. So yeah, that's every week for both the VFL men and the VFL women's side. I'll try and actually do a player profile series on the VFL women before their season starts as well. So go on over. If you want the VFL coverage on the Hoops Crew, go and sign up for a 7-day free trial on Patreon. See what it's all about. It's extended shows, it's extra shows, it's VFL coverage. Go and check it out and join the gang over there. We'd love to see you there. All right, hit the like, hit the subscribe. You know what to do. And until next time, go Cats.